Whew, boy, do we have a delight in store for you on this week's B-Movie Enema the series. Hello everyone, I'm Jeff Arbuckle, and I'm here with my trusty sidekick,
Partner,
Nurse Disembody.
damn straight.
Now we're here at the gaping anus of the B-Movie poop shoot. And this week we have a Jodan Baker masterpiece. Now, I don't want to put myself in the same league as something as brilliant and perfect as, say, Mystery Science Theater 3000, but I feel like when you finally get your shot at a Jodan Baker picture, you've really made it. Nurse, I'm here to say we've really made it.
Made what?
Made it. You know, it.
What's it?
It's not so much an it, but a place.
Where?
You know, the place where we can say we made it. Never mind.
But wait. Does it count if you picked the movie to do?
And never mind, Nurse.
I mean, it's not like someone handed the movie over to you or you got it awarded to you or something. You had to choose it to appear on the show.
I said never mind.
How do you know we made it if you were the one who chose the movie?
You done?
Yes.
Okay, so this is 1975's Mitchell, starring Jodan Baker, and I have much to say about Baker as we continue on with this movie, but let's start with the movie's director, Andrew V. McLaughlin. McLaughlin is kind of a classic workhorse director, for better or worse. He did quite a bit of TV with big-time credits, like Gunsmoke, Perry Mason, Rawhide, and Wagon Train. He also directed 116 episodes of Have Gun, Will Travel over the course of 6 years. However, he also did a lot of movies, but not just any movies either. He worked with a couple of big-time names. He often worked with either James Stewart or John Wayne. He did movies with Wayne like McClintock and Chisholm. With Stewart, he did Shenandoah and The Rare Breed. I kind of think that he was a guy who could handle movies quickly with big names. It was not uncommon for him to make multiple movies in a single year. Now, after Mitchell, he worked on a string of Roger Moore movies, but none of the awesome James Bond movies. No. These were the movies that people like Siskel and Ebert would trash, like The Wild Geese, North Sea Hijack, and The Sea Wolves. These were the types of movies that tended to be made on an international scale with a group of investors, producers, production companies, and so forth. And again, I have to imagine he was a hired hand who could get the job done quick and probably under budget. And it's also quite common to see a fairly large cast in his movies too. Mitchell is no exception. We have Jodan Baker, Linda Evans, Martin Balsam, John Saxon, and even Merlin Olsen. McLaughlin was married 3 times. His second wife, Vita Ann Borg?
What?
Borg?
Drop it. That was 2 weeks ago now.
Anyway, what was I saying? Oh yeah, so this was written by Ian Kennedy Martin. Now those of us who know the man's work and, generally with it, know him as IKM. Now IKM wrote mostly TV. In fact, you can say he pretty much exclusively wrote for TV shows and series, with the only exception being Mitchell. He wrote no other movies. He did get credits for being the creator of a series called The Sweeney when films were made based on the show. And that was about, what else? Hard-boiled detectives on the Metropolitan Police in London. Now, by the way, it should definitely be noted that both McLaughlin and IKM are British. McLaughlin got his start in the UK and then came over here to churn out those Stewart and Wayne flits. How did 2 Brits end up making a movie about a hard-ass Los Angeles detective that's also a chubby loser is beyond me. I would love to know more about how this is made, but I'm not sure we will ever really know. I wouldn't be surprised if IKM wrote this for a British movie or TV show, but it ended up getting over here and turned into, well, this. Now, we're going to get started here, and I have lots and lots more to say about this as we continue on, but for now, I think we should just get things going. What say you, Nurse?
I say, my, Mitchell.
Hey, whoa, not yet. we're going to talk about that later on.
Jeff?
Yes, my dear.
Do you have any idea about what's going on in this movie?
Barely.
You seem awfully confident about that.
Not at all. Here's the deal. Mitchell is kind of an overly complicated movie in that first act. You have John Saxon playing Walter Dini. He's a trade union lawyer, apparently, and he kills a burglar, and Mitchell starts to think it was something more than the self-defense angle that Dini takes. Apparently, Dini is guilty as hell for lots of other things because the FBI is looking into him, and Mitchell is kind of basically told to keep his distance.
Now, why couldn't someone explain that in a much more plain talk?
Because hard-boiled cops don't talk in plain speak? Anyway, his chief tells Mitchell to go stake out this guy named Cummins, played by Martin Balsam. And apparently he's tied to the mob for importing and exporting stolen shit.
Okay, I think I'm with you so far.
Now get this. Using Cummins' connection, a guy named Mistretta, who is the cousin of a mob pal of Cummins named Galano. So Mistretta is using Cummins' shipping deal to smuggle in heroin without Cummins' approval.
Oh my god, this is pretty dense.
In more ways than one.
So, who's the broad?
Oh, that's Linda Evans. And now she's playing Greta, who is basically a plant to keep Mitchell entertained.
Gross.
In more ways than one. So, caught up?
I guess?
Good. So, we have Mitchell played by the incomparable Joe Don Baker. Now, Baker cut his acting teeth on TV before transitioning into film in the 70s. Now, he got a lot of supporting roles early on, but ended up in a 1972 Sam Peckinpah Western called Junior Bonner, starring Steve McQueen. And after having several credits between 1970 and 1972, he hit it fairly big with 1973's Walking Tall as Sheriff Buford Pusser, a retired pro wrestler turned lawman in Tennessee. And this was based on a sort of true story, and it's kind of one of those cop cleans up a crooked town in his own way type of stories. Not sure how that ages these days, but whatever. It got fairly decent reviews as a much more polished and slicker kind of revenge type action flick. And it went on to become a huge cult hit. Got 2 sequels, neither of them starring Baker, and then a remake with The Rock. Now with that, Baker became a viable draw for movies. However, things got a little interesting for Baker as he moves on to Mitchell, and then movies involving cars moving very fast, and then to straight up boner comedy land with 1982's Wacko and 1983's Joysticks. He did bounce back a little bit with movies like The Natural, Fletch, Cape Fear, Citizen Cone, and so on. And he's quite the recognizable person. Now, if you're like me and a huge James Bond nerd, then you know that Baker appeared in no less than 3 James Bond movies. He first appeared in 1987's The Living Daylights, starring Timothy Dalton, and he played arms dealer Brad Whitaker. Now, The Living Daylights is a little bit more of a complicated plot than your typical Bond flick, but he is ostensibly the main villain in that movie, and the final boss of sorts that Bond had to defeat. Then, in the Pierce Brosnan era, Baker played CIA agent Jack Wade in both GoldenEye and Tomorrow Never Dies. He's one of the 4 actors who have played a villain and an ally of James Bond.
Are we simply going to gloss over the Mystery Science Theater connection?
Oh, we absolutely are not. For yet another crowd that I am also very much part of, Baker appeared in 2 very, very, very funny episodes of the original run of Mystery Science Theater 3000. He's forever tied to the final episode of host Joel Robinson with Mitchell. That was the movie being watched as Gypsy frantically tried to help find a way to get Joel to safety when she misunderstood something she overheard the mad scientist say. Then, a few years later, host Mike Nelson watched the movie Final Justice from 1985. In that, Baker played a Texas Ranger who is escorting a mob goon back to Italy, but is stuck in Malta where he makes a big ol' ass out of himself. Now, while Mitchell has the impact of being Joel's last episode, that makes all those jokes somehow even funnier. Final Justice really gives Mike and the bots a chance to poke a little fun at Baker's overall slobbiness. Now, personally, I love Joe Don Baker. At the very least, I can love him for the Bond films he appeared in. However, also, as a Misty, I can love him for being part of 2 very funny episodes of a beloved TV show that I still laugh very hard at to this day. And I can say, though, that Baker was a part of one of the worst movies I've ever actually seen in a movie theater. He was in 1995's Congo, where he plays, get this, Bruce Campbell's dad. And I just can't help but to love this big old teddy bear that is Joe Don Baker. Even though Mitchell is a sloppy movie and kind of overly complicated.
That it is.
Oh, yes. Now, we're given so many names to keep up with. Galano, Mistretta, Cummins, Dini. How are we supposed to keep up with all this? Also, Mitchell apparently is a shitty cop or something. Our first look at him is in the back of a cop car where it appears he's getting a lift from being blackout drunk at a bar. Then he gets chewed out by his chief.
Yeah, talk about false advertising.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, here's the poster. Look at this. We've got the tagline, brute force with a badge, with helicopters, a man with very large machine gun, car crashes, sexy Linda Evans. All of this is over a crazed, I don't know, maybe even coked out Joe Don Baker harpooning the fuck out of somebody. And all this is more or less copied in the opening credits, too. As the name Mitchell is forming like a slide puzzle on screen, we see Joe Don Baker straight up murdering a guy. Where's all this action at? So far, he's been driven home in the back of a cop car while nearly passed out drunk. He's putting in literal hours sitting in a car out front of Martin Balsam's place, and he's even confusing Linda Evans' toes for hors d'oeuvres. You know, I'm actually a little upset about that.
Me too. He's all up in her toes and everything.
Ew.
Ew.
The plot thins? So we learn that Cummins is getting no help with anyone because of the mob stuff that's involved, and that leaves Cummins basically on an island unto himself. So he decides that maybe he needs to work with Mitchell because he's about the only ally he has?
But for what?
Right, well, I think Cummins is real unhappy with this drug shit, right?
Okay.
He's not wanting the junk passed through his deal there at the shipyards or something. I mean, frankly, I really don't know for sure. Cummins is backed into a corner and Mitchell is trying to untangle a lot of shit. And Cummins wants to do a thing.
You got that right.
The movie didn't do so well with critics, if you can imagine. This second act really helps illustrate something that was said very well by New York Times critic Vincent Canby. He said, and I quote, "Mitchell spends what seems to be the greater part of the film climbing in and out of automobiles, driving automobiles, chasing other automobiles, parking automobiles, and leaning against the body of automobiles that are temporarily at rest."
Let's not forget he slammed a guy's hand in the door of an automobile.
Yeah, that's exactly how that quote ends. Then he also shoots a guy while leaning against an automobile, too.
He sure has a thing for automobiles.
Here's the thing about all this. The movie seemingly deals with bad shit like drugs and what have you. However, nothing in this movie happens with any desire to be urgent. Mitchell goes to watch Cummins. He goes home and drinks beer and sleeps with Greta. He goes to the station, gets chewed out, and he goes home and gets beat up before drinking beer and sleeping with Greta. Sometimes those two things of drinking beer and sleeping with Greta happen simultaneously. It's a Rubik's Cube of peculiar. This is kind of supposed to be an action flick, yet like most of the movie takes place at a standstill. There are edits and cuts, but between stationary shots, right? Yeah, there was just a car chase, but that happened what felt like hours ago. And yes, there's that dune buggy chase, and that's where we see Mitchell murder a guy. but there's no music to that. It feels like it's there just to remind us that, oh yeah, this is an action movie with a crazed Joe Don Baker trying to commit vehicular homicide after smashing a guy's head in with a fucking rock, but...
You're gonna say it's Joe Don Baker, aren't you?
Yeah! I mean, you almost can't dislike the guy. You kind of can't like him either, but there's something dopey and goofy about him, and he's our action hero who gets the lady. A lot of the lady.
He even has his own theme song.
You're right, he does. The Mitchell theme song is really likable for how goofy it is. It perfectly suits Joe Don Baker.
My, Mitchell.
See, it's catchy. The song is written and performed by country music legend Hoyt Axton. By 1975, Axton had already released 14 albums, and he was only about halfway through his music career. Axton wasn't just a singer, he sold music or co-wrote music with quite a few notable people. He was a songwriter for Steppenwolf's The Pusher and Three Dog Night's Joy to the World. The latter was a #1 song for like 6 weeks. But I think there's no way anyone of a certain age wouldn't know Axton first and foremost, and maybe solely, for his role as Rand Peltzer in Gremlins. He was the inventor father who was doing everything he could to make for a great life for his wife and son, Billy. Naturally, to try to get Billy the perfect Christmas gift, he happened into a shop in Chinatown one fateful night and brought home a mogwai. In real life, Axton actually struggled mightily with an addiction to cocaine. Some of his songs, like the aforementioned The Pusher, as well as songs like Snowblind Friend and No Song, were reflections of some negative experiences he had on the drug. He was also a huge proponent for medical marijuana. And he had a stroke in 1995 that he never truly recovered from, but claimed that he used pot to relieve the pain and stress caused by it. In 1999, he passed away at the age of 61 after suffering 2 heart attacks in 2 weeks. Now, another notable person to appear in this movie was in this past segment too, and that's the desk sergeant, and he's played by Jerry Hardin. He's probably best known for his role as Deep Throat on The X-Files. Hardin had been in a few dozen shows and movies over the years too. Likely you saw him and thought, hey, that guy looks familiar. Now, one final note before we get back to the movie. There are 2 versions of this movie, supposedly. There's the original edit and the heavily edited TV version that takes out much of the violence, language, and edits a few shots and so forth. To be honest with you, I'm not sure which version we're watching. The movie is 97 minutes, just like our original cut, but when Greta decides to get a little revenge for Mitchell busting her over pot, she writes jerk on his windshield. Now, supposedly, the original version has her writing the word bastard. So I don't know if this is a mix of the 2 cuts or if this is the TV cut or what.
This movie is a real black hole of questions, isn't it?
You know, it kind of is. I can't figure anything out about this movie. Who's that? What's whom? Am I supposed to care about anything? Exactly how much Schlitz can Mitchell drink, if a Mitchell could drink Schlitz?
I guess the only way to find out is to get into the final act.
Yeah, there you have it. Poop shoot. Do as the lady says and take us to the conclusion. What's the matter, nurse? What? What's wrong?
That old lady is left to walk all by herself.
Yeah.
I think Mitchell might have sent her to her death.
That's very possible.
That's not great.
No. Now, what I'm really sad about is why I didn't bother to keep a count of how many times someone said either Dini, Cummins, Mistretta, or Galano. Seriously, if that became a drinking game, you'd be as wet as Mitchell on a Tuesday night.
Well, I was wasted after 5 minutes of this movie.
Yeah, that'll happen. Anyway, let's wrap some stuff up here. Cummins claims he wants Mitchell to help him to be able to bust Mistretta for the smack. However, Cummins double-crosses everyone by first revealing that Mitchell is a cop to Mistretta, and then replaces the heroin with chalk to essentially, I guess, make off with lots of junk to sell for big-time money. But I guess maybe Mitchell was also smart to the idea by having the cops follow him in a chopper. Anyway, Mistretta was planning to kill Mitchell, then put him on Cummins' yacht to frame him, I guess. Lots of crosses.
It's like a 5-way Chrissy cross.
I suppose it was. My head is still spinning here, but let's try to solve that by talking about things I can more accurately wrap my head around. Of course, Deanie was played by John Saxon. We saw him not that long ago in My Mom's a Werewolf. As I said last season, he's got so many awesome credits. He had not too long before this been a major player in the Bruce Lee classic Enter the Dragon. He was active in movies and on TV for over 60 years before his death in 2020. In fact, his final film role is still in post-production, so he's still got something out there. Another returning actor from a first season episode is Martin Balsam playing Cummins. We saw him in the very first episode of B-Movie Enema the series, Eyes Behind the Stars. He was in some great films like Breakfast at Tiffany's, Psycho, 12 Angry Men, Catch-22, and both versions of Cape Fear, just to name some. Cummins' main goon, Benton, is played by Merlin Olsen. Now, Olsen was probably mostly known to people as at least as far as my age, as the flower guy in all the old FTD florist commercials in the 80s, or as Dick Enberg's color commentator on NBC's NFL broadcast, including 4 Super Bowls. However, to my parents, he was a fear-inducing defensive tackle for 15 seasons with the Los Angeles Rams. He was part of the Fearsome Foursome and considered one of the elite defensive linemen of his time. He missed only 2 games in his entire career. Last but not least is the lovely Greta, played by Linda Evans. Now, when she was not getting her feet slobbered on by Joe Don Baker, she was mostly a television actress. She was the 3rd wife of John Derek before he met Bo Derek in launching Bo's career. We'll maybe have an opportunity to talk about him someday. But Evans is known for 2 TV shows, The Big Valley in the 60s and Dynasty in the 80s. She was probably best known for the latter as one of the big members of the cast. She didn't do too many movies, but aside from Mitchell, she did appear in Beach Blanket Bingo as Sugarcane. She was in The Klansman starring Lee Marvin and O.J. Simpson and directed by Terrence Young of James Bond fame, and Tom Horn, which was Steve McQueen's final film. So, Mitchell. So, you find a crate of hamdingers in the storage room?
Hamdingers? What?
You know, so I can escape.
Escape? What are you escaping from?
Well, that's how Joel got out of the Satellite of Love when he left Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Oh, no. There's no escape for you. This is your own personal hell, a nightmare of your own creation that you have to deal with. You're here forever. Mwahaha!
Bummer. Well, okay. I guess you can just tell people where they can find B-Movie Enema stuffs.
Oh, yes. You can find all of Jeff's writings at www.bmovieenema.com. New articles post every Friday morning, and if you want to be kept in the loop with those articles and catch up on the classic articles Jeff posts, you can do so by following B-Movie Enema on Facebook and Twitter. You can also subscribe to B-Movie Enema YouTube channel to see new episodes of B-Movie Enema the series and the various clips Jeff uses in his articles. If you have a Roku, why not add the free channel OtherWorlds TV? That is a wonderful channel to watch forgotten and obscure movies Monday through Friday. On Saturdays and Sundays, you can see all the other movie hosts on that channel too.
All right, fantastic. Thank you, Nurse. Well, that should just about do it for this week. Next week, we'll be back with another new episode of B-Movie Enema the series. In the meantime, from all of us here, from Nurse Disembodied to Mistretta, Galano, Mitchell, and Cummins, I'm Jeff Arbuckle, and I'll see you back here next week. Oh, Nurse, how many Schlitz farts do you think Joe Don Baker ripped off during those sex scenes with Linda Evans?